Welcome to the Go Electric Fleet Show. This is where we sit down and chat about EV fleets, infrastructure, and more. Join us as we explore EV fleets here in BC. So, Brendon, the first thing that I want to ask you is what struck you about this? Because I don't think that a lot of people, we're exposed to stuff like electric buses, electric cars, electric trucks all the time. We see that everywhere. But electric ambulances, now this is something that I personally had never really given much thought to. So I want to know what struck you about what they're trying to do here at BC Emergency Health Services.
Well, I think this interview that we did with Sam Starr presents the unique challenge that a very large and diverse fleet has in electrification. I think they're going to undertake this massive project of research and development to look at their vehicles and identify which are eligible for electrification at this point in time, just based what the market can accommodate. But then in future, as the battery range and the battery densities change in different vehicles, they'll be able to introduce different technology into their ambulance fleet, primarily in Metro Vancouver, and maybe have opportunities to expand that over time into other areas in British Columbia. Got to remember, at BCEHS, it's a provincial program. So it's a provincial fleet. They have about 650 vehicles, maybe even more. And they're looking at developing a solution right now that takes into account electrification for their response vehicles. So we've seen great examples of those at different shows. Right now, they're using the Ford Mach-E platform. It is heavily modified for work. It's a work vehicle, but that is working really well for them to be able to have fast response or be that first responder to a medical site of need. And also they have instances where their supervisors or maybe a higher rank officer would need to use one of those vehicles to get to a mass casualty event. And they've deployed those. They've been running those for a couple of years. And the feedback from staff is that they're incredibly effective. And now they're taking that sort of second approach to look at, is there an opportunity to electrify our ambulance fleet? What is that going to take? And what measures do we need to do in our organization to make that possible? And to look at elements like EV charging, the dwell time at different locations, the uncertainty or the range anxiety that's associated with the duty cycles of those vehicles, but also, more importantly, the way that these ambulances are constructed and put together right now, they have very complex electrical systems on board, as well as heating the cabin to maintain a really nice environment for those patients to be transferred in. And that all requires a lot of energy. So they've got a big task ahead of them in being able to sort of figure out this problem and look at a couple of great solutions to address it.
Now, I want to start with what you mentioned, that this is a fleet of over 600 vehicles. We're pushing 650 or even more. And this fleet is spread out all over the province, right? This isn't just a Lower Mainland or just a Vancouver Island thing. And if you know anything about BC, you know that in one province, you can go from the desert to the tundra in pretty short order. So given the fact that this fleet spans such a wide range of both physical and climatic regions, like, we've got steep mountain passes, we've got, long stretches of relatively straight highway, we've got a whole bunch of everything. How do you even start trying to analyze this much information to make decisions about where electrification works and what kinds of solutions you might need?
Well, they've started, again, with a data-driven approach to their planning. So as Sam mentioned in our interview, they had two different or separate decarbonization plans. And using vehicle data, the duty cycles, information about the range, the climate, and the needs of those vehicles, they're able to sort of develop a comprehensive strategy to the electrification of their fleets. Currently, they're just beginning working on focusing on R&D applications for ambulances. At this time, it's a custom approach, but we've also seen other operators or third-party companies within this area seeing that electrification of emergency response vehicles, whether it's ambulances or fire trucks, is an opportunity. And we've seen a lot of work happening in this space to make that sort of those test vehicles, that beta test vehicles possible and deployed on the road.
I want to touch on dwell time here because not a lot of people might be cognizant of dwell time when we're talking about vehicle fleets, but also how unique the circumstances might be for, for instance, an ambulance or a fire truck or an emergency response vehicle. What kinds of problems, specifically regarding dwell time, are we looking at here?
So again, it's a unique fleet. Within Metro Vancouver, they're experienced or they have data on the instances of these vehicles moving from different hospital back to the yard, back to the workshop at any given time during the day. Like any good fleet, you want to keep those wheels turning as much as possible to make sure that you have cost-effective use of those vehicles. What they did comment on was that in their research and their data collection, level 2 charging would be sufficient at certain locations where those ambulances would visit, like the hospitals. So if they're doing a patient transfer or responding to an emergency, typically that would result in the ambulance being at the hospital for a period of time once they're able to transfer that patient, do all the paperwork, get them taken care of. Could be a matter of hours. And during that crossover period or that period of inactivity for the vehicle, it could be plugged in and charged sufficiently, get a good top up in range so that they can be deployed back out onto the road and be confident that the next call, they'll have enough energy to be able to deal with that effectively and then repeat the process over and over again. So his comment about level 2 versus fast charging was really interesting to me because of that dwell time that they experience during the day. It cuts down on some incredibly expensive charging infrastructure. If you think about DC fast charging, the equipment itself, in instances could be $50,000 to $75,000 just for the equipment, but there's also the civil work and the transformers and the concrete and everything that goes into making that happen and putting that in the ground. If they're able to use the alternative alternating current level 2 charging at those points of dwell or sort of inactivity, it's a huge cost saving for their fleet overall.
And you mentioned cost savings, right? And I think that, boy howdy, when you're looking at transitioning a fleet of, let alone 600 vehicles, a fleet of 60 or even 6 vehicles, costs are really everything. And with that, I'm, just curious as to what kinds of, questions about cost are they considering right now? Because this isn't going to be a cheap transition, right? So how are they looking to proceed, I guess, is the question, given that cost is such a big part of this? How are they looking to proceed?
Well, they've already got an incredible backbone of vehicles. The standardization is worth mentioning here because all of the ambulances in British Columbia, for the most part, are on Chevrolet chassis that operate with V8 gasoline engines specifically. And I kind of like threw diesel out there in our conversation to say, well, it'll be gas or diesel. But he was like saying, no, we transitioned away from diesel a long time ago. So we use gasoline only. And that standardization of the electronic systems and the way that the ambulances are designed outside and inside is incredibly important because you have one vehicle that could be used by multiple different drivers in a day. They've got to be the same. There's got to be the same expectation on functionality, and all the stuff has to work. It's a matter of life and death. So if you have an electronic system or a lighting system or a radio system that's not fully functional, that needs to be addressed immediately because it could impact that emergency call that you would go to. So the standardization in this fleet is really important. And it's a massive challenge for them as they introduce new vehicle technology into this massive fleet of vehicles. And I would say that this challenge for the emergency health services is probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges I would see with a fleet rollout that we would maybe even look at experiencing. It's a large amount of vehicles. The use cases are different. Not one's the same. The vehicles have to be standardized because the users of them, it's so important for them not to be caught out, when they're in their day-to-day operations. I think that right now they're in a research and development phase of this project. So obviously there's an anticipated large cost that would have to be serviced for a full rollout of these vehicles over time. And they're working on a multiple year process. So like we're talking decades from now, if this research and development comes back to say, yeah, this is a viable option to decarbonize this fleet in that way. What they could encounter during this process as well is maybe there are options for changing engine types. Maybe there are options for just focusing on electrification of those fleets in urban centers. Having a look at trying to make a dent in their current fuel consumption and emissions output over time. So I commend Sam and his team there. They're doing a great job. They've formalized an approach. They're doing a data-driven approach to this project and this problem. And I'm really interested to see what happens in future and what the outcome of this research is.
Just to kind of wrap things up, I do want to kind of ask, was there anything that kind of surprised you or anything that kind of took you, that caught you off guard? Because this isn't, like I mentioned at the start, a feature or even a transition that I think a lot of people might be very familiar with or conscious of. So as somebody who is diving into that and, coming back out and seeing what's happening, is there anything that caught you by surprise?
Yeah, so when we were doing the walkthrough and having a look at some of the ambulances that were in the workshop, I called it a workshop, but it's their station, and it's a building where the ambulances come back to at the end of the day, and they're restocked, they're cleaned, they're deep cleaned. The minor maintenance or issues is taken care of, and essentially it's a main dispatch point for those vehicles to go out and do their jobs. And one of the things that really surprised me when he sort of had this, we had this walkthrough, and he opened up sort of this door on the side of an ambulance, just like a normal ambulance. All of the electronics and the inverters and the battery systems and everything like that already deployed and sort of installed in these vehicles was really impressive. Like I was like, wow, look at these wires and everything like that. And it sort of occurred to me that this is not just like a van with lights. There are very integral systems, electronic systems that exist in these vehicles that are installed there and are active all of the time to be able to help these paramedics or this emergency services system in their response to help somebody's life, to save a life. And there's not just a cost that goes into the vehicle and the lights and a couple of radios. There is an extensive cost in fitting these vehicles out with very technical electronic systems to be able to sort of deliver that emergency response. They also showed us these incredible gurneys that you can sort of pull out of the back, and it was all electrified. So in order to save the backs of the paramedics having to pick somebody up when they're on this sort of stretcher or whatever, there was this full electronic system that essentially at the touch of a button, you could pull the patient out of the back of this ambulance, put them down, and then just wheel them away. So those little things were really like, wow, like this is incredible. I've never been in an ambulance before. So having that behind the scenes perspective was a real eye opener, and was something I sort of like took away, being like, wow, this is really exciting. Like there's a lot of research and development that goes into the emergency response vehicles as they are. Their next step is to say, okay, great. What are we doing to address the emissions in the drivetrains of these vehicles as well? So it's going to be great to keep our eye on this story as it develops.
Brendon, thanks so much for this. I'm also really keen to see what's going to happen with this, because this is a major transition that quite literally has the potential to save lives.
Yeah, it was a great interview, Andrew, and I just really want to thank Sam, Jose, and Ryan for accommodating us at their station and just spending some time with us talking about their project and talking about the future at BCEHS.
And I think it's always important to think about, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is inform, is to get people to think and to learn. And for me, the big takeaway from this was the sheer amount of information that actually goes into planning something like this. Like, for just one example, dwell times for an emergency response vehicle, that's a big unknown because, like we were saying, you might be called out to an emergency, you might be, moving around and being in different places for varying amounts of time. I'm super interested in seeing how the technological changes that are being implemented right now will help make this work. That's all for today's episode. Thanks so much for sitting down and chatting with us. The Go Electric Fleet Show is made possible by Plug-in BC, and I hope that you've also taken something away from this wide-range conversation about a core public service that's being slowly but surely transformed. My name is Andrew, and you're all charged up and ready to go.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more updates on fleet electrification and other sustainable transportation solutions. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Go Electric Fleet Show.